Open platform. They're going to do an awesome job explaining it on a really 101 level, and we think it's an incredibly important thing for everyone in this room, no matter what you do here at Periscope, to understand these platforms for a variety of reasons. So talk to John and Lee to get invited to that, and look for more information to come really soon. All right, the startup grind. We'll dive in. Startups. What is a startup? So we talk about startup as a startup company is an entrepreneurial venture that is typically newly emerged, fast-growing business that aims to meet a marketplace need by developing an offering, innovative product, process, or service, right? So we think about startups, and we think of some of our favorite companies today that are kind of out of the startup mode, but started as startups, right? We have Spotify, Airbnb started as a startup, Uber, which, right? Dropbox, Square. Those are all kind of some of the big-time startup companies that started really small, got dumped a bunch of money on them, and then all of a sudden they became really big, right? But startups are a really interesting thing, and I think ultimately, like, why do we truly care about startups? Like, why does that matter? We're in the advertising industry. Why do we need to look at these startups? And Liz mentioned this, and you're going to see some of this today. But when we look at 7 startups today, we're going to run through them really, really quick. Some of these are going to say, wow, that's super weird. Like, why does that matter to me? And truthfully, like, why is that going to matter to the work that I'm going to do back at my desk? Some of them are going to be consumer focused, some are going to be business focused, but ultimately what I would encourage you all to do is dig beneath the initial layer and think about the technology that's behind it. And know that these companies are some of the most rapidly changing and innovative companies in the entire world, and that they're constantly looking for opportunities to place these ideas into kind of engagement points that we deal with every day. So please, please, please look to these beyond kind of the facade that we're going to show today. Ask questions, do research, and as always, all of this content is going to be available via Edge afterwards. So think about it a little bit. So we're going to start with Bark. Bark's tracking digital content autonomously. How many parents are in the room? Who has kids? Anyone, right? There's a couple parents in the room. And as you know, I'm not a parent myself, but I deal with this, whether it's through church at mentors and things like that. But the amount of digital content kids are punching out each day is increasing rapidly, right? And for parents, it's kind of a scary thing because we don't necessarily know what they're doing online. And in the past, we've been able to grab the phones at night and look through text messages, look through Facebook, and say, oh, looks pretty good, all good, that's great. What Bark does is Bark is an online service that integrates directly with Facebook, Instagram, iMessages, Snapchat, to directly collect and scan all of the content that your kids are pushing out autonomously. And their algorithm actually looks for key indicators for sexting, bullying, suicide, and will alert the parents automatically when it detects that. And so they've scanned and analyzed over 5 million messages to increase this engine so that you wake up as a parent and say, hey, you've been alerted, your kid sent this text message last night at 10 o'clock, here are the parties involved, it triggered the bullying warning, here are a couple ways that we would recommend you to deal with it. Now, for advertisers, like, why does this matter? And I think the biggest thing to look at this is basically saying, we now have the ability through AI to constantly read mass amounts of information and analyze them appropriately. Now, how that affects our business, I think, is different for every single client that we work on. But for parents, this is only $9 a month per family. So you have 5 kids, it's pretty incredible. And no longer do you need to turn in the phone at night, and it'll constantly kind of scan those things, which is really, really cool, right? So Square. Especially in the last few years, you're seeing a lot of Uber for blank, right? Uber was obviously one of the big-time startups that we've all taken a look at, and in the last couple of months has taken some interesting turns, but we won't go into that now. But Square is an Uber for haircuts, right? So book an appointment online at a barbershop near you, get Square. And as you can imagine, when we look at an Uber for a haircut, it is an online platform where it feeds both the people who need haircuts, like me, and the people who are really good at giving haircuts, like the private barbers that are spread throughout, the country, right? And so it can service both of them, but it's pretty easy. You can simply find a barber in your local area. You can book an appointment all through the application, and then go get your cut at a time that's applicable for you. Now, ultimately, like, what if, right? So we talk about Great Clips a ton. I don't personally work in the Great Clips business, but I know what comes up a ton is the appointment application, where you're able to dive in, find something, check in, all good. What if we were able to enhance that just slightly using some of the features from Square? Maybe we don't copy Square completely, but what if we partner with them? Or we recommend an acquisition and take some of the things that they have there, put it on top of Great Clips, and enroll all the Great Clips stylists in here to bring a new layer of engagement to that platform, which would be really, really interesting. So that's Square. AirFox. So I was looking at AirFox for a little bit, and I came up with this really kind of interesting statistic, and I think any of the IT guys who are in here can probably attest to this. There's 100 million US cell phone subscribers that are on a plan with less than 1 gig of data. And for a lot of us, we all know 1 gig is not that much of data, right? That's, a couple of days on Snapchat, that's some basic emails. It's a gig, right? For some, it's okay, but for more people, it's not. And so what AirFox does is AirFox is a service provider that partners with brands and cell companies like AT&T, Verizon, et cetera, to give brands the opportunity to sponsor data packages, right? So hear me out on this one. So let's say Facebook. Let's say Facebook wanted to jump on this platform and say, you know what? We're going to pay for all of the data that anyone uses on their cell phone that is on a Facebook platform. So anytime you use Facebook or Facebook Messenger, you're not paying for any data, free, unlimited. You see kind of T-Mobile using this, right, with the Netflix and the streaming services, right? But as Facebook as a brand, they're able to jump in and say, hey, we're going to completely sponsor data for Facebook. Now, Facebook obviously is a huge kind of advertiser conduit, but as brands, we can also use AirFox to do that too. So, if all of a sudden we say, hey, Trolley, and I'm going to go to the next slide. Hey, Trolley, what if we were able to pay for all the data as long as you're on a Trolley-owned platform? So you're on the Trolley Instagram channel, you're on the Trolley Facebook channel, you're on the Trolley Tumblr, you're on the Trolley.com website. We're going to be able to say, hey, if you just live on Trolley, if you just live on the Trolley Tumblr site, we're going to take care of the data costs for you. You don't need to worry about that gig overhead. It brings up a lot of interesting opportunities for our brands to get involved with the data-sucking applications that we constantly try to push on. If you look at Snapchat, it's one of the biggest data hogs ever. What happens if we were able to pay for viewing Snapchat stories that were by our brands, and we were able to pay for all of that through AirFox, which is pretty incredible to think about. Drizzle. We talked about ad blockers, and ad blockers are a thing, a part of life, part of our lives especially, and they've grown exponentially. I think people in here, we have ad blockers probably on our browsers, which is an interesting point. We won't debate that right now, but ad blockers are here, right? And ultimately, they have a huge impact on our business, right? So there's predictions that there's going to be a $35 billion revenue that's going to be lost because of ad blockers, and that affects a lot of us pretty substantially, right? But you have companies like Drizzle who are looking to say, all right, we're losing money based on ads that are being blocked online. But we also know that there's some really rich content that deserves to be monetized. We deserve to get benefit from it, right? So what Drizzle does is it's an online layer that can be put on top of actual online content to be able to, whether it's pay for subscriber, right? So instead of like subscribing to the New York Times, maybe you pay 10 cents to read that new article, right? Or maybe you subscribe, but you only subscribe for the day. Or maybe it detects an ad blocker and allows you to disengage your ad blocker in order to be served content. Now, how this applies to the brands and the strategies we have online is different for each one of the companies we work with. But it's interesting that companies like Drizzle are taking on the ad blocker revolution really carefully. Most of this right now is pointed at people like the New York Times, like online bloggers who are being hurt because that's their revenue stream that's basically being eliminated. But for us, as we create content on these digital platforms that are being affected, we want to keep a close eye on Drizzle as we start to look at how we can start making money on some of that content. Awesome. So I just kind of went through that a little bit. Earn it. How many people had a piggy bank when they were growing up, right? A big piggy bank full of a lot of dollar bills, little quarters, all that kind of stuff. But what's interesting is as we continue to look at the new kind of money revolution, it's a new world of money, not many of us carry cash anymore, right? I don't carry any cash. I have no cash here. Like I would imagine as parents, it's probably a very similar situation. So how is money tangible to a younger audience? Like how are we actually going to create tangible forms of currency when truthfully all it is, it's not even in our credit cards anymore. It's on Venmo, it's through your Wells Fargo app, it's through these alternative payment processes that we don't even see it anymore. So basically Earn It took this on and created this kind of IoT device that was kind of the first like digital piggy bank, right? So it's a physical device that you can set simply on the dresser or wherever your piggy bank once stored, and it integrates directly with a children version of the application and a parent version of the application. From the kids side of things, kids can start to budget, right? So you say we get $5 of allowance, 10% of it goes to the church, right? That was my rule. And then 90% of it can go to whatever you want, right? So maybe 40% go, whatever it might be. But it gives kids this tool to actually start to plan how to use digital money, which is no longer, it's no longer kind of this sideline thing. It's a main point. From a parental side of things, you can start doing some of these more advanced online payment features that were once reserved to these big-time banks for your kids' weekly allowance. So you have auto payments, you have one-time payments, you have gifts, and everything that you do on the application is then reflected within the digital display that is shown on this IoT kind of powered piggy bank. So kids still have that idea of tangible finances without necessarily having the dollar bills you have to keep in forever. Interesting for some of our clients to think about, even if we go beyond banking clients, we look at what else is out there that's trying to integrate within kids or spending in general. Like for trolley, like how potentially are we going to sponsor the trolley allowance, right? Which would be interesting. Arena. So sports are more fun when we chat in the moment. We were just talking about Minnesota Twins for the last couple of weeks, and we always look to kind of figure out how to bring the experience in stadium to another level, specifically with that client, but for other clients as well. We've done stadium sponsors with a lot of other brands too. But Arena, basically what this is Arena is a digital platform that comes to life in stadium and through live streams of the actual sporting event. And it provides fans there the opportunity to create kind of their own social network as they're sitting watching the game. So we've all seen, pictures of all the fans. The phone is now your second screen, right? The phone is the second screen as you're watching the baseball game, as you're watching the football game, whether you're on ESPN or not. But what Arena does is an online platform that allows you to stream alternative points of view. So maybe you're looking at views from the dugout or views from home plate as you're actually watching it live. You can chat with all the people that are there or chat with a private group based on kind of how you would like to organize that. But it comes to life in stadium, which is really crazy. The other thing, too, is it coordinates with live streams as well. And so for the Minnesota Twins, we were talking about some interesting ideas. Maybe you don't have the best tickets, but we can also put cameras in the dugout, at home plate, on first base to give people on their phones or give spectators on their phones an interesting point of view when they're in stadium rather than being in the very top deck. The other interesting thing, too, is that as we continue to engage more, they don't necessarily need to engage just with fans. You can engage with sponsors or concessions or the team, whatever you'd like to do. So we can see some interesting ways not only for our sporting brands like the Minnesota Twins to come to life, but for other brands that have potential stadium activations, or how can we become this really integral sponsor of sporting events, which could be really cool. All right, got two more. And I always had trouble pronouncing this next one. I'm going to call it Pomica. We'll say that. What's been interesting is that for a lot of our brands, we've been investing really heavily into social platforms. We just had this conversation with Trolley. Why do we need a .com? And we've put so much money and we're so successful in Instagram and Snapchat and things like that. But what the challenge of some of those is that we're constrained to figuring out how does that necessarily lead to an actual purchase, right? So as we're trying to build content for Instagram, how are we actually showing that that's going to have an effect on the people who are actually purchasing the product? What Pomica does is it makes Instagram shoppable. And so what's interesting is that the application pairs directly with your Instagram account, and then you go ahead and authenticate it. And every photo that you like goes through the engine. And I have a little example of what this is, right? So you're in your Instagram account, and I really like that dress and that hat and that bag. I think they're great. I'm going to go ahead and like this. And I can then go ahead and open the application. What the engine actually does is it's going to use image recognition to scan the actual image that I liked. It's going to pull it in, it's going to scan it, and it's going to pair me with the actual products that are seen in that photo to online e-commerce opportunities. So I don't necessarily need to know what my favorite celebrity was wearing. I don't need them to tag anything in the description. I can actually just use this application. It's going to scan the image. It's going to say, hey, Kanye was wearing those really cool leather pants that I bought, or Kim was wearing that really awesome dress that I'll go any further. But what this app does is it uses the image recognition, scans it, pairs it with online e-commerce opportunities to basically build that bridge where you're able to actually purchase the products you see on Instagram with only a few taps. For our brands, you can imagine the opportunity here. Now, this is in a really early beta, but because of image recognition, we had this really interesting way to pair the two when we used to have to say, link in bio or try to link things out and link things other places. Just didn't work. So we're able to do all that here with this application. Talked about so what, not necessarily just clothing. Like think about what other things that we can recognize in images that can drive to e-com. And so think a little bit about that, which is really cool. Go grandparent. Go grandparent. This would probably be the hardest tie for brands, but I thought it's absolutely fascinating. So Uber's, once again, I bring up Uber, and I know they're in trying times, but Uber's a really, really cool application. My parents still make me pick them up from the airport at 3 a.m. They're not grandparents yet, but it's so frustrating because I try to talk to them about how Uber is still a really, really cool platform, but they still have that barrier. They don't get it. They don't understand it. What a GoGo Grandparent does is it transforms those digital opportunities like Uber into a touch-tone phone service, right? So we talk about the technology behind it. We're going kind of back in time here, but something that's really, really comfortable to my grandparents, right? So GoGo Grandparent, I was actually going to call them here live, but I won't. But you simply call a 1-800 number. So my grandparents call a 1-800 number, and it's as simple as this. If you want a car to come to your home and drive you somewhere, you press 1, right? If you want a car to go to where you were dropped off last, you press 2. You have 3 custom pickup locations that you can select using 3, 4, and 5. So, Target, or the 3 places your grandparents go probably, right? Or you can speak with an operator, right? So you can actually talk to them. What's interesting about this is it still uses the power of the ride-sharing service Uber, but it puts a facade on the top of it that your grandparents are actually familiar with using. And so it opens up the opportunities for Uber to actually transition into an entirely new market without trying to have to teach your grandma how to use an iPhone, right? Which I think is absolutely fascinating. The other really cool thing is that their kids or whoever's looking after your grandparent who needs to be in the know can also get text message alerts based on when they're being picked up, where they're going, when they get dropped off, etc. And that's the example that you see over here in the left or on the right that shows exactly how this kind of integrates within all of the people involved within this, which I think is really cool. Ultimately, it's a huge opportunity as we continue to look to the seniors that are growing and how we're continuously saying, hey, tech is all good and great, but we also have to look at the users that we're trying to target, right? So we might not necessarily just put all the bells and whistles into an application and think it's good. We need to start looking at actually the demo that we need to target and the need state to figure out what is the user interface that we're building for. All right, last but not least, QOP. So QOP, and we see a little bit of this, and we're doing a couple reports for a few new business pitches and things we've done from JCPenney before too. But how is actually the physical retail experience jumping into the next world? Like how, e-com has expanded so far and continues to go, but like this physical retail experience continues to like kind of be this lagger and fall behind. So QOP is a company that provides these smart anti-theft security tags that lock upon payment. So what it does is you put these security tags, you see those really ugly ones that are sitting on your sleeve, they have ink in them, or they alarms. What QOP does is it provides those tags, but the tags actually have a little code on them. And as a customer, I'm able to quickly enter that code into whether it's their app or their engine built into a retailer's app, and I'm able to pay right sitting with that tag using Apple Pay or using whatever payment I'd like on my phone. The second that the payment is received, the tag will then be unlocked. So customers will then take the tag off, throw it in a box, and walk out of the store, which now we're connecting physical goods with digital payments, but we're also taking care of security. So we don't necessarily need to worry about a bunch of people just walking out saying, I paid with my phone, don't worry about it. Without actually using any store employees, we're able to take care of the security of the goods by simply having the system acknowledge that that specific tag is good to go to be unlocked. It unlocks, you throw it in the bin, and you walk out. A really cool technology that's being used. And it's interesting as we look to this, is like how are some of our more traditional retailers, how could they use this in interesting ways? So we looked at a few things. Once again, real fast, but I have a couple minutes for questions too. So we looked at Square, we looked at kind of the Uber for hairstyle, right? We looked at Bark, we looked at AI engines tracking mass amounts of data, specifically for kids to keep them safe, right? And having parents give new tools to kind of monitor that. We looked at AirFox. We looked at this solution that is sponsoring data packages, so branded data packages to take care of people's somewhat meager data plans. We looked at Drizzle, a new interesting way to get around ad blocks. And we looked at Earn It, a way to bring new money into kind of the allowance world. And finally, we looked at Arena, sports, social networking, Pomika, looking at scanning Instagram content to be able to bring them right to an e-commerce situation, GoGo Grandparent, Uber for old people, and then QHop, bringing some IoT tech and bringing the digital world into physical retailers to make that connection. So there's a few ways to continue to stay up to date with startups. And I think there's a group in here, and we love to stay on top of this. Now, if statistics continue to show, a lot of those guys will be gone, right? It's just like new businesses. They're going to shoot it out there. They're going to get a bunch of money, hopefully, and we'll see how long the runway lasts for them. ProductHunt.com is an awesome website to go to each and every day that lists mostly digital products, but lists the kind of top couple products that come out that day. We actually did a report in early January about the Target and Techstars, which is a startup incubator partnership. So they had 10 startups sit at Target over the summer. and be kind of incubated within that retail space. And we did a focus on each one of them kind of through their progression of that program and where they are today. And we actually met up with a few of them at CES as well, which was a lot of fun. So that's available to download on Edge. It's a really, really cool retail-focused startup report. And then Beta MN, this is just one of many kind of Minneapolis-based startup organizations. And a group of us are actually going to what's called the Showcase next Thursday, which is a group of about 10 or 15 startups that are sitting kind of in this huge room. It's actually going to be at the machine shop. And you can go around and you can meet the founders and you can vote for the startups that you think are the most applicable. And you kind of vote with these coins. It's really, really fascinating to see super early tech startups and being able to actually talk to the people who are making them. So there's a group of us going on Thursday. If you want to come with us, please, please don't think that you have to be in a certain department to do it. Everyone is welcome. We should all be hanging on to that. As always, everything is available via Periscope Edge. So I have about a minute, and I cruised really fast through it. I'd love to hear any questions that you guys might have. Anyone?
When people start approaching like a digital platform but have a really physical space, how do you speak to your client about how it won't cannibalize some of the business? Like with the sports app where they want to get people to seats, but now this app shows you like a really cool view. Maybe I don't want to put seats anymore. How do you balance those?
That's a super great question because we run into that a lot. And I think in the early stages years ago when like e-com came along, they're like, oh, we don't want to do too good of an e-commerce or we don't want to do too good of a tool because they're not going to come into our retail store and that's where all our money is. I think it's interesting. In the retail report we did last week, there was a couple applications that were designed specifically to enhance the retail experience physically, right? So it integrated within the shopping experience. It didn't necessarily replace it. But I think it's important to look at how those types of things can actually enhance it rather than completely replace. And so maybe it's not, maybe we don't give full live stream, but maybe we give, you know, a live stream of the dugout, something that only, you know, you'd be able to get if you were on that platform, rather than saying, hey, we're going to give you the live stream of the entire game. You don't even need to sit down, right? So, cool.
What are the capabilities of that physical digital piggy bank? Like obviously all the touch points are on the app, but what can the actual piggy bank do?
So it's got a display on the front of it, and so it's got an LED ring and then a display. And the LED ring will show you the percentage that you are towards your overall budgeting goals for the kids, so they can see how close they are. And then there's certain things that can be read out based on like, what's your balance in your piggy bank? So kind of making that kind of money tangible to them as it sits on their. They don't necessarily need to like go into an app and look how much money they have. They can kind of see that as a day-to-day interaction, which then puts the value back on the tangible money that we've kind of lost with digital payments.
From an internal Periscope perspective, if I see an opportunity with something, am I reaching out directly to you or which department to start to develop a POV for my client?
That's a great question. So we can provide POVs, so that's something myself and Paul and the group can take on for you. What's interesting about startups is usually the teams that are running startups are incredibly accessible because they want to talk to you. They're looking to grow, they're looking for new opportunities. So how we handle that would probably be on a case-by-case basis, but we can find the best way to connect. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Cool. Thanks again for coming, guys. Really appreciate it. We'll be hanging out for a little while. So. Hey, thank you for coming.